I'm Neil Graham, and on episode 125 of the Lowdown Radio Show, Michael Uhlarik tells us about the quiet revolution taking place inside Yamaha. Now, unlike, for instance, certain American motorcycle manufacturers, Yamaha wasn't bleeding cash or in a crisis of confidence. Yamaha makes money. And yet the CEO for the world's second largest motorcycle manufacturer envisioned a day when storm clouds, yes, those storm clouds again, would form in the low western sky to potentially threaten the well-being of his company. Is this a sign of a millennial mastermind at work, or is it paranoia brought upon by the instability of the tumultuous world in which we live? You be the judge, but remember this. American taxpayers were spared the weight of billions of dollars in loans because one domestic automotive CEO once had the foresight to do exactly what Yamaha's boss is doing right now. This is a bit of an unusual conversation in that we're talking about a corporation, Yamaha, who's not in crisis. When normally we talk about, lately it's been Indian and Harley Davidson and these flamboyant CEOs that have come from various, one, Mike Kennedy with Indian, departed one major American manufacturer for another. And then we have Artie Starrs, who's come in and trying to shift Harley Davidson. But the Yamaha story is different. And here's my question to you. What typically happens within companies, not when things are dire, but when things are going well?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And it's the kind of thing that doesn't get covered because, what's not exciting news? The sun rose today and, millions of people went to work and nothing happened. That's not exciting news. And in the motorcycle mobility automotive space, this is most of the time, fortunately. Most of the time, most large conglomerate automotive firms just get to work. And it's incredibly hard. It's a very competitive space, as I've mentioned in other interviews with you. There are more than 1,000 brands in the motorcycle universe. Now, most of those are resellers, what we call white label. They're importing a product from China or India or wherever, and they're just putting their label on it. But even the brands that we all think of, the four big Japanese, the European legacy brands, the aforementioned Harley Davidson, for the most part, these are multi-billion-dollar companies. And most day-to-day operations are pretty dull. They're exciting for the people inside them, but for the rest of us looking in, it's just like business as usual. And it's very hard, and it's an achievement to be business as usual because it's difficult. There are so many things inside the manufacturing of complex things like motor vehicles. The most complex thing we manufacture are vehicles. The biggest cost inputs are beyond the control of the company. Energy cost, labor cost, tariff tax regimes, material costs,
Right.
completely outside the control of any company. So when times are good, a wise corporation, a wise motorcycle company is seeking to buffer, like anyone in your household, probably not my household, but a wiser household.
We'll keep my household out of this.
It's probably best for both of us.
Oh, God.
If you're doing it right, you're supposed to be putting money aside for the proverbial rainy day. You're supposed to be paying down your debt and building a debt buffer so that when things go wrong, you can dip into lines of credit. You can dip into savings. That there's a plan B if you lose your job. Company is no different.
There's a story that I love. A friend of mine, his wife works at one of the major banks, and she was part of this group. This goes to what we're talking about. She was part of this, and I think they called it something euphemistic, like the Blue Sky Group or something like that. Not to be confused with the Blue Man Group, which is...
That's some big.
There were no costumes. No body paint was involved. But what they tried to do, and there was this group of people from various parts of the bank, and they would try to think what could potentially harm our business that we can't think of at the moment. And we're going to try to stretch our minds. So one day before lunch, and this is pre-pandemic, which is important to frame this conversation. One guy said, well, what if something happened where none of us could go into the office? And everybody laughed and they went for lunch. So there's a couple things out of this. First of all, you can't anticipate everything. And secondly, I mean, there's sort of human stasis. I mean, we have this thing as humans. I mean, and we're flawed. We think if things are getting better, they're going to always get better. We don't want to or almost can't think of things of the downturn. And so, I mean, how much of a corporation just reflects human frailty?
I mean, I don't care what country you're from. I've had the privilege to travel and work with people around the world. We're all the same.
We're all the same schmuck.
We're all the same schmuck. And but here's the nice part of it. It doesn't matter where you're talking to a Chinese entrepreneur, Chinese engineer, a Chinese factory worker. And I pick on Chinese because there are a lot of strong opinions in the forums around this. They're not your adversary, nor is the Japanese equivalent or the German equivalent or the Canadian equivalent. They're just like you. They wanna go home, they want tomorrow to be a little better than today, just a little. That's it. The promise that tomorrow will at least not be worse. Companies are the sum of, the people that are in them. You know, I've said this when I was discussing Damon. I said this when I, in the past, have talked about companies I worked for in the past. Uh, you know, so much has been made of in the era of social media about company culture. We have such a great culture. The moment a company starts talking about its culture, it doesn't have a good culture.
You talked about Yamaha doing something unusual at the moment because Yamaha's in a good position. They're a healthy company. They're doing well, accepting their MotoGP program. But other than that, they're doing well. So why is what the new CEO doing of note?
Yeah, so they issued this, corporate report, which is, every major corporation does this. Every year there's an annual report. It's huge. It's full of buzzwords and statistics and press stuff. But they also introduced this what they call the financial year 25 integrated report. They have a new CEO. He's a young guy, Motofumi Shitara. He's a millennial. Okay, so this is a younger man, his mid 40s. That in and of itself is unusual. Traditionally, in Japanese corporate society, leaders tend to be older. Japan is changing like everywhere else, of course. He's not an engineer by training. But what makes it unique is that Yamaha has had by any measure, a strong year in calendar 25, and certainly very strong year in 24. And this report is critical and almost harsh. It basically berates Yamaha as having failed because its previous CEO. It's not like they're throwing him under the bus. It's no drama, nothing like that. The previous CEO had a turn, had his own buzzword plan, that was based around growth, blah blah blah. He suffered injury, and actually a knife attack. So he's fine, but he requested retirement.
But he was not in. Just to clarify, he wasn't in the office at the time.
No, no, no. This
It was
was outside of work. This is not a corporate drama.
right.
The point is, they brought in this new CEO or created a new CEO from someone who had come from a different division from Yamaha Motor, India, which is the largest motorcycle market in the world, a very, very competitive market. And his vision, Shitara's vision is, look, we are like he's looking at the automotive world. And what he knows is what we all know in the motorcycle business. Motorcycles follow cars 5 to 10 years behind on everything, on tech, on trend, on design. It's just the way it's always been. What's happened in the car world, the electrification revolution. And I know there are people, this never going to work, EV, blah, blah, politics. 20 to 25% of new cars sold in the last, in 2025 were electric. That's a quarter. It's conservatively a fifth. And it's up from, high teens the year before. Any other industry in the world, that kind of change, annual change, there'd be no debate. But because it's mixed up in people's ideologies, there's all this confusion. Business people don't care about that. They're not looking at politics or ideology. They're going, okay, electrification took the winners and losers of automotive and flipped it around. And really serious car companies are facing existential threats. This is coming on two wheels. He saw this because he came from India, where electrified motorcycles are taking off 3 times faster than electrified cars. And it's the world's largest motorcycle market. Yamaha could see with crystal clarity what's happening. And it's not just electrification, it's the big picture. It's the tariff regime, it's the breaking down of globalization. This is a company that is 70 years old in the motorcycle business, over 130 years old. Let's remember Yamaha was founded in 1887. It's an older functioning company than any other motorcycle company in the world today.
Alongside the this new sort of marketing initiative, which is not more than just that. It's a rethinking of your own history and sort of incorporating some sort of pride into your own company, as you explained it. But there's also this what the CEO has implemented is there's some very sound financial things that he did as well, including kind of a war chest. Is there not?
Well, that's it. Yamaha has been making small bets on the future, like through their Yamaha Motor Ventures unit. I'd say small, they're huge by anyone else's standard, but by the scale of the corporation, minor investments. They've led multiple rounds with a Indian startup called River. They're in their Series A now, 120 million. They've invested in companies that are making pretty bold changes, and that is a war chest because 1 out of 10 startups will succeed, but they'll succeed at 50 or 100x the investment. And given where the point at which Yamaha is entering. So that's one thing. They're also, through those startups, able to do experiments that they would be nervous doing under their own name. They're dramatically increasing their capital expenditure, like 1.3 times what they were doing before, which means they're putting the pedal down in terms of R&D. We're going to have new models from Yamaha very soon, and not just here, everywhere, because I lived this. I lived this through the Great Recession, and I lived this through the European recession in 2002, 1 and 2, when I was actually at Yamaha. The companies that came out strong, everyone else had to pull back, and they were selling the same products, same vehicles, same motorcycles that they had been selling for 3, 4, 5 years, and just putting new stickers on them or changing the paint. And Yamaha and Aprilia came out with new vehicles.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a new product, and consumers suddenly start going there. And then they've also created they're pushing hard on savings operationally in order to increase their credit available credit. So the point is, at, when something happens, they have shifted production for the Americas into America as much as possible, reduced cost in America as much as possible because of the tariff regime and the unknowability of what will be the U.S. market situation in a year, in 3 years.
Which included moving the U.S. HQ away from expensive California to less expensive Georgia.
It had nothing to do with expensive California. This is a silly myth.
Oh yeah, that's not true.
They owned the property. The property had increased in value 40-fold.
Oh, but they could sell it and build condos, right?
Well, that's it.
Yamaha Condo Corporation.
That's it. Yamaha Condo. Instead of condo, it would be condo. I like it. Kando, for those listening, is a Japanese word for spirit. The spirit imbued in inanimate objects made by people. And it's a key sort of part of the Yamaha culture. So,
oh my God, we are onto something. Revs your heart. Move over.
Call me. Call me Yamaha Motor US if you got an idea. Um, well, they consolidated in Georgia because that's where they built their watercraft, and that's where they're increasingly going to be producing the side by sides, which are the on ATVs. It just makes sense. It
Lower
costs.
wages, do you think?
I don't think it ultimately makes. I mean, it's a right to work state, so probably. But the reality is that California, it's harder and harder to justify sitting on that expensive property, and they could have moved to a cheaper place in California. God, it's a big state. But they already had a footprint in Georgia. That's it. That's all it was. They do this in Europe too. They closed down a facility in Barcelona that they'd had for decades. It wasn't that they were abandoning Spain. They just consolidated around Italy. It just made more sense for the company at the time. It's just corporate spreadsheet stuff. But you can read into your politics if that's what makes you happy. I'm neither Californian nor Georgian, so how about it?
I think if you more sort of Mississippi. Now, you made the interesting connection that what the Yamaha boss is doing has a parallel in the automotive world. So I thought this was an interesting, what's the word I'm looking for? Comparison that you made. There's a better word than comparison, but
Analogy.
that's the best analogy. Thank you. So take me through, how is this familiar to what a U.S. car maker did 15 years ago?
Yeah, so in the mid 2000s, Ford Motor, was doing well. They were their historic position, number 2 behind General Motors in terms of US market share. At that time, GM and Ford were still global companies. It may shock some Americans to know that they are Ford sort of is, General Motors definitely is not. But they were big in Europe, they were big in Latin America and China, and everyone was smoking cigars and patting themselves on the back, and people were buying Suburbans and Ford Explorers. Ford got a new CEO, Alan Mulally, who'd come from Boeing, the aircraft company. This was Boeing when Boeing was blue chip as it gets, when Boeing was the gold standard for engineering quality excellence, period. Um, and Mulally had polished and burnished the Boeing reputation further. And Ford calls him in and say, "Come fix my car company." And the interesting thing is, fix what? Profits were okay. Structurally, the company seemed fine. They had, competitive products vis-a-vis GM, certainly, Chrysler Group at that time. Um, but Mulally comes in and looks at the books and says, "I see what's happening here." And he does this, it's the Shitara thing. He says, "We are going to clean this up. We're going to get out of business units that don't make sense. We're going to consolidate around the things that we do well, and we're going to farm out the things we're weak in, and we're going to do a massive borrowing spree. We're gonna build a pile of cash as a reserve." He hawked everything. At that time, Ford owned Jaguar, Volvo, the Premier Auto Group, as it was called, Aston Martin. Got rid of it. He got out of some other side businesses. He then went to Wall Street and raised $26 billion, which today doesn't seem like much, was a lot then, a lot more then. Um, lever like as and put everything, as they say, bet the farm. Put the physical property, the logo, the intellectual property of the blue oval logo itself as collateral against these loans. And they did this, and, the press at the time was kinda like, you know, the Detroit press was hilarious. "Ah, ha, ha, here comes a guy from outside automotive. He doesn't understand the car business."
So what was the media's response? Did they think he was paranoid? I
They
mean,
thought he was an outsider whose ideas didn't make sense in the milieu of automotive. That automotive was about taking big shots, big risks, big characters. You had, Bob Lutz was at GM at the time, and characters with big personalities, Bob Eaton at Chrysler. These guys were, we're gonna make these bold bets on, making this kind of special model and that kind of special model, and we're gonna do this kind of racing. And Mullally is the quiet, tweed suit guy from Pacific Northwest who's like, let's just get the money sorted out and for a rainy day. And of course, within 18 months, the rainy day was the financial collapse in 2008. I'll remind those who were there and, inform those who didn't know. General Motors and Chrysler Group went bankrupt. First, they went to the US government for a bailout, which they got, and then they went through bankruptcy. Bankruptcy. General Motors was not just the largest automaker in the US, it was the largest automaker in the world for
Mhm.
decades and was at one point the largest company in
Company
the
in the world, yeah, yeah.
and they were now on their knees. And the United States government under George Bush, and it was completed under President Obama, issued these bailouts. And, who didn't need a bailout was Ford. Ford had done the hard work. They renegotiated, and this is key. When things were going well, they went to the unions and they renegotiated the severance packages, the pay upgrades, they tightened up the pension obligations. And they had this buffer of cash. So when the recession came, they were agile. They were able to respond.
I mean, was the Ford I mean, the thing that strikes me about this is, was the Ford boss really that prescient? Did he know? Like, did he know that the 2008 crash was coming? Or did he just get, like, some weird itch in his ass that told him that things were not gonna be good? And, I mean, how? Because it seems a bit weird that oversimplification, because it makes a better story. One guy says, "We're gonna do this," and everyone else is just at the bar hammering him back.
Um,
That's an analogy.
yeah, yeah. And the listeners from Detroit will be like, "That's exactly what happened."
That's exactly what happened, yeah, exactly. In fact, I'm still at the bar.
Yeah, they were all at 3 Mile. Yeah. No, listen, I don't know. I haven't done a deep insight into the Alan Mulally, restructuring.
Right.
I know what the automotive community knows, but Ford Motor has 2 classes of shares. Stick with me here. The point I'm making is it is a public corporation. Shareholders are like any other giant US company, Legion, and they're all institutional shareholders. But the control still sits with the Ford family. And like control, not absolute control, but they've got a heavy finger on the scale. And the Ford family operates Ford a little bit still like a family business. I suspect, and you guys check it out yourselves, but I suspect that they were just kind of prudent. And look, Malali came from aerospace, from Boeing. It's a global business. He had been traveling around the world doing big deals with governments and
Right, right.
corporations, supranational corporations on a level that no automotive executive would. I suspect that just really smart people were advising him saying, something might go terribly wrong. And when he took the Ford, I mean, he might have been the Ford Motor Company internally who, when they hired him specifically, maybe sought him out because they said, "We're worried about the future. Are you the guy who can fix this?"
I think this may have been the origin of the term headwinds. Do you think? You think? Because he came from Boeing and, you know, gets windy up in the sky. Do you think, Michael, that I'm onto something?
I don't think it's as strong as Kando condos, but I think we're pioneering new businesses here left and right.
The Lowdown Radio Show is presented by advwriter.com. Become a site supporter and receive our biannual magazine. advwriter.com. So how is this going to affect some of the products, or the products we've seen, or the products that we have? God, we love the 10 or A7. There's so many great bikes that Yamaha's doing, and where do you see these new ideas and products? Where do you think this is headed?
So I think I wouldn't say I think I objectively see um, that Yamaha has an incredibly deep catalog of vehicles that make sense in America and elsewhere, that have origins in Asia, India. Thailand, Indonesia, etc. Um, it's great news that the XSR 155 is coming to the US. This is a retro style roadster like its big sister, the XSR 700. Only yes, it's 155 cc. It's got 17 and a half horsepower. It's going to be affordable. It's a Yamaha, so it'll be dead reliable and really, really, easy to use. And no, it's not going to make it on the interstate, and that's not the point. And I highlight that vehicle because this new Yamaha corporate attitude is going to show, I think, a lot more boldness in thinking. It used to be that Yamaha was structured. There was YMUS, Yamaha Motor US, YME, Yamaha Motors Europe, you know, and these there were other divisions, and they were kind of Yamaha Motor do Brazil, and they operated as almost independent companies, directly liaising with Japan and very seldom with each other. There are amazing Yamaha products made very close to American shores, for the Mexican market, for the Brazilian market. Uh, and they never made it over because of this or that and the other. And the same is true for Europe, and the same is true for other places. I think this boldness, this global view is what Shitara is talking about. And I think the fact that they're putting their foot down on R&D, I think we're going to see some really exciting new product. To American listeners, watchers who are saying, well, they've been selling the same, you can still get an FGR 1300, which is at this point a 27-year-old platform. Um, yes, you can. They're good at that. The TW 200 is in it's like a Broadway show. TW 200 now in its 48th year. Um, this is good. They make vehicles that make them money and make thousands of people happy with very little effort. Meanwhile, they're also making new product. You're not going to get the product of your dreams if you can't sell enough of them to justify keeping the lights on. So to answer your question, I think the next few years, I think next 18 months, you're going to see a very big revamp of product lineup, especially in the United States.
Hmm.
Um, the products are not gonna come from Japan, mostly. The big stuff will. You're gonna see a lot of Yamaha uh, from Indonesia, from Thailand, from India. They're going to do their best to navigate the tariffs however they can. But, a 20% tariff on a $3,000 motorcycle, not that
That's tough.
painful.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
and when the consumer is confronted with a choice, I can get a bike from a Chinese manufacturer that I may not have heard of before. And maybe I've got some residual discomfort with that. And for an extra 500 bucks, I can get a Yamaha from my Yamaha dealer. Um, Honda's already doing this. Yamaha's doing it a little bit. What I'm suggesting is they're going to do it a lot more. This Yamaha US, California, I think, we started this conversation talking about culture. I think Yamaha US culture was really rooted in a couple of I'm not calling anyone out, but some lifers who had been around that beautiful campus in California for maybe a little too long. And we see this all the time, and it's not a US phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. You get people who stick around a long, long time, they bring institutional knowledge, it's wonderful experience guidance. But they can also start seeing their viewpoint as the only viewpoint. And I think this shakeup, even just physically moving across the country, means there's going to be fresh hires. Those guys aren't going to move to Georgia. They're going to be new people running the show at YMUS. And they're going to be people who come from a more global a generation that's more agnostic about, well, I don't care that this is, made in Indonesia. It's just fucking cool. And we see the trend. We've talked about Suron and the Light B. Young Americans want affordable, cool motorcycles. The
Yeah.
XSR will be exactly that, the 155. And I think it's just the tip of the spear. So I think it's going to be good times for motorcyclists and fans of Yamaha Motor. And here's hoping that they get their MotoGP act together.
Just as before I let you go, as an aside, do you think that this change at Yamaha is it significant enough within Japanese industry that other brands, Honda, for instance, will that it could potentially affect them? Will they look over and think, "Oh, we're sitting on our hands a little bit"? Do you think there's anything there?
Certainly for Kawasaki and Suzuki. And this is important. I this it's a big point, so give me a moment. Honda and Suzuki and Yamaha and Kawasaki are not motorcycle companies. They are conglomerates. Honda is a top 5, a top 10 automobile maker. Like, the scale of these organizations does not go into the same universe as BMW or Harley or KTM or any of the Chinese brands. It's just not. Like, Honda doesn't look at Yamaha for inspiration. Honda looks at Tesla and Apple and, you know, the world's largest corporations in every silo. Honda makes rockets, reusable rockets, and industrial robotics and aircraft. Kawasaki Heavy Industries is a behemoth that has its fingers in everything from, military aerospace to shipbuilding and power plant construction. Motorcycles is a quaint little thing in the corner. They're like, "Oh, yes, I sometimes I forget we make ninjas."
Right.
Um, and Suzuki, although a low-end automaker, is India's largest auto brand. Maruti Suzuki, which is a Suzuki JV. They're the most popular automobile brand in Southeast Asia. So, you know, half the world is driving a Suzuki automobile. So when when we put it in that framework and someone says, "Well, SG650 hasn't changed in 6 years," or whatever, like, that's not really their priority. Um,
Right.
but that being said, I think Suzuki and Kawasaki is more proud. When they introduced their traditional logo a few years back, the H, and they're a little bolder, they're a little more proud. But Suzuki definitely we should see some reaction to Yamaha because they have an amazing portfolio of motorcycles in the Southeast Asia that millions of Europeans and Americans, I'm sure, would love to ride. Like 200, 500, 400 cc, 155 cc step throughs, cool looking, really fun to drive, really affordable. Like, bring it on and be proud. Barry Sheen won championships on a Suzuki. Suzuki has done incredible things on motorcycling and at Daytona. They need to be prouder. They need to lean into their history. They need to lean into the fact that they are a Japanese company and they're trusted and beloved largely because of that. I mean, just look at the ADV community here on this forum that talk about the DR 650. I mean, that's not a great motorcycle, but people love it. That's that's the heartwood of a brand.
That's
Um,
because it's a way of life! Exclamation mark.
you really are a marketer today.
I contain multitudes.
You do.
Michael, thank you so much for this today.
This was fun. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you again for listening to the Lowdown Radio Show presented by advrider.com.